scolded for being so much with the slaves and threatened with punishment when I would intercede for them.
Okay, one of the things, thank you very much. One of the things that you notice there is he's referencing differently than I'm referencing. He references slaves, which is very common in the United States, but what I was trained, I've worked for 3 HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities, is we usually refer to enslaved people or enslaved Africans or enslaved African Americans. When you just reference them as slaves, you take what little personhood they had left away from them. You refer to them almost like you would refer to the cattle or so forth and so on, which is exactly what they were property. So you give them back a little bit of their personhood by referring to them as people in some way in that context. Is that this is not a conversation of black hostility, by the way. I hope y'all know me well enough to know that I would not do that to you. That is not why we're here. So there's no need for anybody to start squirming, no need to be uncomfortable. This is our shared history. All of it is ours. It is shared. So everybody remain calm, okay? Okay, good. He attended school in Kentucky and then in Ohio. When he realized he had experienced a call to ministry, he attended seminary as well. While he was at Lane Seminary in Cincinnati, 2 important things happened. First of all, he began to realize that what he was an abolitionist. And I'm going to read the little banner, which is kind of hard. I think it's a little smudgy and you know, the room is a little challenging. But the banner is quite interesting. Outraged fellow citizens and abolitionists of the most revolting character is among you, exciting the feeling of the North against the South. A seditious lecture is to be delivered this evening at 7 o'clock at the Presbyterian Church, thank you Presbyterians, on Cannon Street. You're requested to attend and unite in putting down and silencing by peaceful means this tool of evil and fanaticism. Let the rights of the states guaranteed by the Constitution be protected. February 27, 1837, the Union forever. The point I want to make about this is what a significant decision it was for Fee to become an abolitionist. In this point in time, there are 2 races in the United States. Either you're white or you're not. You're white or you're not. The whites were protected under law and so forth and so forth. Everybody who was not white was not protected. And we can go through our history and see that. And so what Fee is doing in this one decision, basically, is he's taking himself out of the advantage and the protection and the security of being white and subjecting himself, he's going to the other side. He is still a white man in look and heritage and so forth and so on. But how he will be treated from this point forward will be as a man who is not white. And so it was a huge decision. This is an amazing decision that he was making. Moving forward, the other thing that happened that was significant is he met missionaries who had been working in West Africa. So for a while he thought that's what his calling was, that he needed to go to Africa and work there. But as you know, that wasn't exactly it. He too took this as his text. I'm going to read because I love this so much. One of them, a lawyer, he's asking Jesus a question to test him. Teacher, which commandment in the law is the greatest? He said to them, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. We always use the Matthew, but it's in all 3 of the synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. John's a little different. But all of them have that same text. A little similar to this few little word tweaking with this. In all 3 texts, you shall love. And as you know, of course, you've noticed that is also in the, in the vestibule of Danforth Chapel in Greater Hall. It's on our campus. And so it happened. Fee became an abolitionist, and in so doing became completely estranged from his father, from his family members, and from many of his friends. Those of us who study Fee identified 2 other events that need to be noted. One of them is long, the first story is long, the second story is short. But we're going to start with the long story, and that's Juliet's story. When Fee had just begun his ministry, he received word that one of the women in his father's household, an enslaved African American, Juliet, who had helped to raise him, was about to be sold away from her husband, her children, and her grandchildren. She was still a fairly young woman, but she had grandchildren. And they decided to sell her because they said they just didn't need that many women in the house, so they're just going to go ahead and sell her. Fee raced 25 miles to his parents' home. The money he had gained from the sale of his land in Indiana was in his pocket. He asked to buy Juliet from his father. When his father refused to sell, he mortgaged the rest of his land to raise the extra money. His father finally agreed to the escalated price. And what I find interesting about this, among other things, is look at what this has done to this family. Good glory. I mean, seriously, do you see this? This is bad. It was Fee's intent to free Juliet. However, while they were waiting for the clerk of court to arrive on his circuit to register the bill of sale, Fee's mother learned about the sale and she objected. Fee's mother pressed Fee's father to buy back Juliet, and when Fee refused to sell her, his father gave Juliet two conditions. Either she could leave her husband, her children, and her grandchildren, and never return to Fee Farm, or she could stay and work for free as if she were still enslaved. Juliet agreed to stay with her family, but when she did, Fee's father again threatened to sell her, even though he no longer owned her. And what Fee discovered when he went to an attorney about this is that his father probably could prevail in this. He'd emptied his pockets, you see what I'm saying, trying to save her. And now she's under threat again. The lawyer said that since she was on the ground, that was prima facie evidence that she was owned. It's like if your cow's in your yard, that's prima facie evidence that that is your cow. And so since she was on the farm, that was prima facie evidence that the father still owned her even though he had sold her. Eventually, though, Fee was able to talk his father into going ahead and signing a bill of sale and relinquishing control of her. Not long after that, Juliet and her husband discovered that he had not actually been sold to Fee's father. He had been sent in bondage to him as an indentured servant, and he should have been set free a number of years ago. So at that point, he was able to get his back pay, and together they left. However, as the nation began to divide allegiance leading up to the Civil War, Juliet began to worry about her children and grandchildren's safety, and she returned to the farm in an effort to try to get them to go with her to Ohio. She was caught, and she was charged with attempted theft of property, namely her children and grandchildren. Her children and grandchildren were separated and sold, and were never heard from again by their parents or by their grandparents. Juliet was imprisoned in Frankfort, Kentucky, and Matilda Fee, John Fee's wife, was able to go to the prison to visit her. They would not let the two women see each other. Matilda was forced to talk to Juliet through a hole in the floorboard above her cell. On another trip, Fee and Matilda were both able to see Juliet and spoke with her about her 9 children, all lost to her. Juliet never experienced freedom in life again. She died in prison. Fee said that he had seen countless acts of physical torture inflicted on enslaved persons in his life. However, and I'm quoting, "Yet this torture of the body was the least part of the agony of slavery. The agony of the crime was on the soul. The crushing of human hearts, the sundering of ties of husband and wife, parents and child, shrouding all humanity in a long night of despair. The crime," he said, "was on the soul." This depth of understanding, hallelujah. The second event is a little bit more upbeat, so everybody put yourself together. The second event occurred toward the end of the Civil War when enslaved African men in the South and border states were being enlisted into the Union Army. Fee was serving as chaplain at Fort Nelson, about 20 miles south of Lexington. He came to act as chaplain to what were called the colored troops, and no sooner did he get to know them, and then the wives and children began arriving as well, he began to teach them. And they all wanted to learn, and they all were eager to learn, and most important, they were all able to learn. As you know, one of the disputes at this point in time was whether or not African Americans had the intellectual capacity to learn. And so he discovered, yes, in fact, the ones that he was dealing with certainly did, and others must surely do have that capacity as well. An idea was born, a vision was received, and Fee's idea, as you know, the vision he believed he'd received from God, was an interracial coeducational college. Don't you love this picture? The very first building, in which people of different races, backgrounds, and genders would live, socialize, and work together. Let me repeat that: live, socialize, and work together toward a world shaped by Christian values, such as the power of love over hate, human dignity and equality, and peace with justice. It was a vision for more than a school or a place of employment. It was a vision of community, Berea College, and the idea was rare. It was rare then, and it's rare now. It's a high bar. What do you see here? These are all pieces from you can't see it very well here, from the library. But this is up to 1890. They were tracking black-owned houses and white-owned houses, and they were noting in this little, it's a little thing with a you've seen Euclid probably, you know what I mean? Yeah, exactly. That little, yeah, I called it this morning. It has the plexiglass over it, but it's showing how the neighborhoods are interspersed. It's not whites on one side and blacks on the other side. It's whites and blacks living next door to each other. And of course, we know from that date that they're less than 15 years out of trouble, because 1890, the day law was in 1904. So the little progress that they've been able to make is about to be nullified for quite a long time, actually. So let's talk a little bit about Berea College today. We have a really diverse student population. So let's talk about that a little bit. In terms of gender, obviously male and female, are we getting some transgender students? Yes, we are. So just so you be aware of that. In terms of races, the 4 major in the United States, every once in a while, either some Native American or people with some Native American in them. Of the races up here, what's the fastest growing in the United States? Who knows? Or thinks they know? Actually, no. Mixed race. Mixed race. Actually, yeah, I thought so too. I heard just recently over the weekend, it's mixed race. And what we're finding also, not just here but elsewhere, is mixed race students are starting to say they don't want to identify one at the exclusion of the other. So that's a development that's very interesting as well. Some are differently abled, and we're going to be doing some differently abled related work on campus through the Campus Christian Center this year as well. Our Congo speaker in the fall will help us kick that off. And some of them are going to discover that they're differently abled while they're here, which is to say every once in a while you will get a student that is having trouble getting the work done and so forth, and ends up being tested, and we figure out why it is. They're dyslexic or some other learning challenge has been hobbling them all this time. Place of origin, you all know most of the story, but also we have a number of students at this point who are the DREAM Act kids, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, the DACA kids. One of the things that's interesting about them, of course, is that they cannot vote. I was talking with one of the tables on Sunday and got on the quad, and they're registering voters, but the young man who was doing the registering was saying that he could not vote, and that's because he has no documentation. And that's part of the reason why he's interested in registering others, because he feels so strongly about the vote. And a mixed bag. A number of our students are homeschooled, which I find interesting. We have the full range of Christians of many types. We have a number of students, spiritual but not religious. We have some none, which is don't talk to me about any of that stuff. But we do anyway. And then the major religions of the world and so forth and so on. And the way I put it is everything from conservative to hippie, from uninvolved to over-involved. And over-involved, I mean the ones who are missing labor because they're somewhere demonstrating again. And I'm supportive of that, but every once in a while it's like, oh, help me, So, but anyway. So with age, of course, we have our standard Asian, our non-traditional. A lot of our non-trads live in the Eco Village, which is marvelous, the work they do there. And we have students with children. We have students who marry each other, which is kind of charming. We run a lot of weddings, right, Marcia? We run a lot of weddings in Danforth. It's a pretty busy marriage chapel. Obviously, common ground, modest family income, academically promising. We have around, usually tops out about 47% of them are a person and their families to go to college. So, and then of course, with labor histories, y'all have seen it all. Some of them have always worked. Some of them have never worked. Some of them have just begun recently working. Many are inexperienced in the workplace, but will not acknowledge this, and that is you all's territory right there with first-year students. They're going to come in swaggering, a lot of them. They're pretty pleased with themselves. They know they got this. The classroom thing may be an issue, but the labor thing, honey, they got that. But they don't realize often they know as little about the workplace as they do about what's going on in the classroom. And I don't mean to be setting them low. I'm just reminding you they have a lot to teach. Just very, very basic things that you all know just automatically. Oftentimes they don't know. Self-expression begins in college, and you get to see it all. Fashion, the piercings, the hairdos, the hair color, all the different manifestations of I'm away from home and I can now be who I am. Media influenced, so they're tied in into what's going on in the world. What this means also is we're going to have some that have been to the Mount Day demonstrations, but we also have some at this point who will probably end up going to Ferguson at some point. So keep in mind that they are participating in the larger issues of the day. And of course, the Ferguson piece is going to come back to us as we talk a little bit more about race. All of them are smartphone preoccupied. I went in the green room on Sunday morning. We were getting ready to have the worship with the international students. Every single international student had their cell phone in their hand. And one of them came up to Vernon from Robert's shop, was working, doing the sound and filming and so forth. And he said, well, my parents need to see this on now. They need to see it in wherever it was. I don't know where the child was from. Now. And they're like, not quite yet. We'll get it to you in a week or so. But they were, the idea of having it instantly. They want to share this experience at home and they want to do it right now. One of the things to keep in mind, they will need to get an internship. Just having a resume is no longer enough to get a job. They need an internship. So they have to be able to work well for you because they're going to go to an internship and work for somebody else. So any bad habits that you can help them get under control while they're with you are going to help them when they hit the internship in the summer. Internships can also result in jobs, but bad internship experiences can result in trouble. So it's very, very important. And I needed to say some of them are absolutely marvelous. We've had some superb students, and I know you all have had in our office. I just really wept when they left. Many of them are under a great deal of pressure from home, and we'll talk about resources for that. And many of them, forgive me, but I must say, are talented at making situations work to their benefit. And they work other people, and they're going to work you. Some will overestimate their skills, especially their writing. We had an instance of that last year, just a dispute that came up on a job, and it just wasn't as good as they thought it was. I guess it was good in their high school, but it wasn't good here. So that's a little bit of a takedown when that happens, but that's what college is for. If we weren't going to teach you anything, there'd be no need to do it. Some will not be honest with you. Some of them will become ill on the job. Serious problems. Yeah. Drunk on the job, high on the job does happen. Yes, it does. And it continues to come through the intervention response group that meets on Monday mornings at 9. Students who have been sent out from their job. So let's go forward a little bit and talk a little bit about what needs to happen. The work needs to get done. Ideally with everybody working. The problems we've had have been when one student starts not working in the office, it kicks everything else into the pool. You know what I mean? So one student is just enough to turn the whole situation upside down, as you know. The students need to be strengthened in the work experience. I'm going to let you read that. We've had students like, well, do you expect me to do that? Yes, we do. Now, let's go back to where we started from with Fee. You need to run the risk of relationship. Loretta and I sat down, Loretta Reynolds, who's been here forever and knows all about Berea College, and we sat down yesterday and talked about some of the experiences people have, some of the experiences you have, and the experience of race, especially when you get young African American students who've never worked outside the home, who now have a white supervisor and they're away from home and they don't quite know what they're doing, and the next thing you know, squabbling is going on, or somebody's sulking, or there's an attitude problem, and so forth and so on. We were talking about what needs to happen. And we decided caring is key, and we're going to go through the caring list that we came up with, but there's a little bit more that we're going to add on the end of that as well. A supervisor is you're clear, you're fair, you're consistent. And this needs to hold true, especially when you have a mixture of races and cultures in your job setting. You need to be fair, you need to be clear from the beginning, fair and consistent. The problems that we run into, I find, as I said, I sit on the intervention response team, is when forgive me, often it is one of our African American students who feels very out of place here, decides that since they don't feel like they're here, they don't need to act like they're here, and they find some reason why they should not be doing what they need to be doing. I'm going to give an example of myself, and so you'll understand I'm not just messing with you guys. I see we're close to done here. I went, when we had the flood, remember we had a call for belongings for people who were flooded out this summer, and I had my belongings and some other folks' stuff for the folks, taking it over to the Appalachian to send it to drop off. So it's in the back of my car. I stuffed my vehicle into that little parking lot that I'm not supposed to be in the first place. And I'm trying to get this stuff in and 3-4 loads into the building. And I passed an African American young man who was sitting there on his earbuds, hello, and and one of the rocking chairs. This apparently is a student worker. So I said to him, could you help me? And he does, yeah, I know. I'm like, oh my, that was a moment. That was a moment. So I'm doing this and he's doing this, and so I go back for another load, and I say something to him, and then he does. I'm like, oh my word. Now here's what's interesting though. I didn't snatch him bald headed. And I found myself wondering this morning, why didn't I? Because I just regretted so much that moment, that teachable moment that we could have had together. And I realized part of it is the black schools get in kids' face all the time. We will yank them in a minute. We're a little bit more, whatever, a little bit more circumspect here, and I've tried to adapt to Berea's culture of not yanking them, you know what I mean? And I think that was part of it. But I also I had to study on it as I continued to carry these groceries and so forth into the building. I had to kind of study on what all happened there. And I finally figured out what it was we have a challenge here of the sense of belonging and not belonging. And he felt he didn't belong, and you can understand why in some ways. As I say, a lot of our African American young people, especially the guys, are inexperienced working outside the home because for various reasons the families have not been comfortable sending them into the workplace for fear that they're going to be mistreated. So their first experiences for many of them are here. However, him not acting like a Berean, which is you don't stand around and let a gray-haired woman carry groceries while you listen to you, the feeling of not belonging, I let it continue by letting him get away with it. But it also reminded me of the challenge that you all must run into. If I would hesitate about correcting an African American male, then obviously you would hesitate about correcting an African American male for fear of being called racist. You know what I mean? It's that's the race card that happens here. Oh, they're racist, and then off we go with a whole round of argument and so forth and so on. But belonging here is working. Everybody works. And letting them get away with less than that is telling them that they don't in fact belong. To belong here, you carry your weight, and a little bit of everybody else's as well. So let's go forward, and I don't want to run long on you because I know you have a long day. Keeping the balance between taking pride in themselves, speaking up when it's appropriate, and respecting the needs and the priority of the workplace. The workplace has its own needs and priorities. Remembering the students don't always know as much as they think they do. And then this is what I was just talking about. With all of our students, please don't let sympathy or confusion silence you as a supervisor. We have resources to address their various needs. Don't let them shut you down without regard to race or nationality or other things on the job place. And also, we have resources we can send them to. Raise your concerns before they become issues and have a plan ready for use in raising concerns. Somebody said to me, well, when they're late the third time, I'm like, well, what happened when they're late the first and second time? You know what I'm saying? So you have to kind of get the language together. But in the red box, or it actually was red, but it's not part of it, but it's a soft racism, a soft kind of prejudice of lowered expectations. If you assume that the student can't, or that they shouldn't have to, that invites them to assume the same thing. And since I've been here, I've seen us send a few of our African American males and a few other students of other backgrounds out into the workplace, and they bounce out of that first job in a hot minute. They put them right out of there. And it's because we allow them, in many instances, to rearrange this world to accommodate their needs. And then when they go to the workplace out there and try to rearrange that world and start threatening race, they're like, well, fine, you can sue me, but you're out of here. You know what I mean? So you can stand up too. And I got your back. You can stand up to, yes, we all work here and this is the job for everybody. We had an instance, Darlene and I talk about this a lot. I went to the workplace 5 days, 5 students. Somebody had to sweep each day, sweep the whole place. This is your day, this is your day. We had a student there who refused his day. They said, well, should we give him another job? I said, no, give him a broom. But you see what I'm saying? You know, I understand when he's saying, well, I'm too dignified and I'm too sophisticated. What if everybody else is sweeping? I've swept. You swept. We sweep it. But anyway, moving on. I'm sorry, that's true. It needs to be true. And this is what you do as a special extension of our community. It is part of who we are. And I thank you so much for the work. A good supervisor keeps that in mind. And then we enrich each other's worlds. The encounters on the workplace is part of the enriching experience that they get at Berea. It doesn't have to all please them to enrich them. And so I was listening to something last night, and they were just talking about opening the question of race and the question of belonging, which is where I wanted to give John Powell credit for this, just the question of belonging. Treat them like they belong. Don't let them get away with making you treat them as if they don't belong. They do. And then also this, the PowerPoint will be available, so forth. Appalachian Question, the Appalachian Center, and on and so forth. Our centers are good sources of support for you and help. If they're having problems, study skills, they can't seem to get it. You know, we've had the Center for Transformative Learning or religion, and they say, well, they can't work on Tuesday, it's a religious holiday, you're not sure. Give us a ring-a-dingy over at the Campus Christian Center. Check it out. If they're having, some of our international students will get very, very homesick. And so sometimes it's a good time to call the International Center and say, can you give me a hand with this? Counseling service, if they're blue on the job, they're crying, they're on the phone, family things, you may want to send them straight to counseling or straight to us. Legion can be of support to them as well with kind of personal problems and so forth. If you're wondering, is there a disability? Contact Lisa, Disability and Accessibility Services. Don't be hesitant to move that issue onto one of the places that can help you. Hold them to it, please, because they need it. This is a balloon world out there these days. They need all the strength that we can give. And thank you very much.